Welcome to Game Theories, where I introduce theories of management, administration, and leadership. This is episode 45. Today, we'll explore diffusion of innovations, a theory that explains how new ideas, practices, and products spread in the social system, such as an organization or society. Imagine you have a new idea. How do you ensure your idea reaches every corner of your organization? The theory of diffusions of innovation can provide you with a blueprint. The idea of diffusion of innovations can be traced to the late 19th century. The study of diffusion of innovations gained significant traction in rural sociology in the Midwestern United States during the 1920s and 1930s. With rapid advancements in agricultural technology, researchers began examining how independent farmers were adopting new hybrid seeds, equipment, and techniques. In 1962, Everett Rogers, a professor of rural sociology at Ohio State University, published his seminal work, Diffusion of Innovations. Rogers synthesized research from over 500 diffusion studies including anthropology, rural sociology, education, industrial sociology, and medical sociology. Rogers applied his synthesis to the healthcare field, addressing critical issues such as hygiene, cancer prevention, family planning, and drunk driving. His work produced a comprehensive theory on the adoption of innovations among individuals and organizations. Diffusion of innovations and Rogers' subsequent books remain among the most frequently cited works in diffusion study. His methodologies continue to guide contemporary diffusion studies, now enriched by disciplines like social network analysis and communication. To learn new theory, we need to first define constructs. In the theory of diffusion of innovations, diffusion means the process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. This statement has four key constructs: innovation, communication channels, time, and social systems. Let's look at them one by one. Picture a ripple effect. You drop a stone in a pond and watch as the waves spread outward. Here, the innovation is your stone, the idea, the practice, or product that is perceived as new. It doesn't matter much whether the idea is objectively new in hindsight. Communication channels are the ripples, the pathways through which innovations travels. Time is the duration over which those ripples spread. Social system is the pond itself, the network of individuals and groups who will adopt this innovation. Now, let's follow the journey of our stone from drop to ripple. This journey is known as the innovation decision process, and it unfolds in 5 stages. The first stage is knowledge. This is the initial splash, where the awareness of the innovation begins. Think of it as hearing about a new software tool or a practice at a conference. At this stage, you learn what the innovation is and how it works. Here is where curiosity is sparked. Next comes persuasion. This stage is where the initial ripples form as people start to consider the innovation. People seek more information, weigh the pros and cons, and form a collective opinion of it. Imagine a group of colleagues discussing the new practice over coffee. One might say, I think this practice could streamline our workflow, while another expresses doubt. This exchange of opinions is important because it shapes collective attitudes. The third stage is decision. This is the turning point. Here, people decide to adopt or reject the innovation. This is a critical moment influenced by the information and attitudes formed in the earlier stages. At this stage, there are 4 types of innovation decisions: optional, collective, authority, and contingent innovation decisions. Optional innovation decisions are made individually and are not influenced by the decisions of others. Each person evaluates the innovation based on their own needs and preferences, deciding whether to adopt it independently. Collective innovation decisions requires a group consensus. The decision to adopt or reject the innovation is made collectively, often through discussions and negotiations, to reach a mutual agreement that reflects the group's shared interests and values. Authority innovation decisions are made by individuals or groups in positions of power in an organization. Those decisions are typically top-down, where leaders or managers decide on the adoption of an innovation, and others are expected to follow their directive. Contingent innovation decisions are conditional and depend on the prior adoption decisions of others. For example, an individual or team may decide to adopt an innovation only if a certain number of other people or teams have already done so, ensuring that there is sufficient support and proof of effectiveness before committing to the innovations. Now we move to implementation. This stage is about putting theory into practice, watching the ripples spread as the innovation is implemented. At this stage, plans are executed and real-world applications begin. Employees begin the new practice, training sessions are held, and initial feedback is collected. This hands-on experience is important for innovation to take root and show its true value. The final stage is confirmation. This is where the initial decision is reinforced or reconsidered. Will the ripples continue to spread or will they fade away? For example, after a year in a follow-up meeting, the team reviews the practice's impact. Positive results like increased productivity reinforce their decision to continue using it. But if the practices fall short, they may reconsider their choice. In any social system, the adoption of innovations happens at different rates. This creates different categories of adopters, each playing a unique role in the diffusion process. First, we have innovators, representing 2.5% of the population. They are bold and adventurous people who eagerly dive into new innovations. They are risk takers, often driven by a passion for cutting-edge technology and a desire to be first. Think of someone who pre-orders the latest gadget before it's even widely available. Their enthusiasm and willingness to experiment pave the way for others to follow. Next are the early adopters, making up 13.5% of the population. They are respected opinion leaders who adopt innovations early but thoughtfully. They carefully evaluate the benefits and the potential before committing. Their endorsement inspires confidence in others to adopt the innovation. The early majority, comprising 34%, are deliberate and cautious. They adopt new innovations just before the average person, often waiting to see proven results from early adopters. For example, a team observes the positive outcomes experienced by early adopters. They decide to implement the new practice themselves, assured by the proven success and reduced risk. The late majority, also 34%, are skeptical and resistant. They typically wait till the majority had adopted the innovation, often driven by a sense of necessity rather than desired. Think of employees in an organization who reluctantly adopt new software only after it becomes industry standard and essential for their work. Their adoption is driven by the need to stay competitive. Finally, we have the laggards, representing 16%. Those traditionalists are the last to embrace new ideas, often holding on to established methods until it is no longer viable to do so. Think of someone who clings to outdated technology until their organization mandates a switch to a newer system. They adopt innovations only when absolutely necessary and often with reluctance. The percentages in the diffusion of innovations theory represent the distribution of adopters over time. But where did those specific numbers come from? Everett Rogers compiled data from over 500 diffusion studies across different fields, such as agriculture, education, industrial sociology, and medical sociology. By synthesizing those studies, he observed that the adoption process followed a normal distribution, the bell curve. It's the blue curve you see on the screen. The normal distribution curve is a fundamental concept in statistics describing how traits are spread in the population. Rogers applied this concept to the diffusion of innovations. He proposed that each of the 5 groups of adopters has a specific percentage of the population. Now let's shift our attention to the S-curve, which represents the cumulative percentage of adopters over time. The S-curve illustrates the rate at which the innovation is adopted by the population. At the beginning, adoption is slow because only the innovators and early adopters are experimenting with the new idea. As the early majority begins to adopt the innovation, the rate of adoption accelerates, leading to a steep upward curve. Eventually, adoption slows as the late majority and laggards finally adopt the innovation, leading to the curve leveling off. Here is the question: why does this S-curve take off at around 10% to 20% adoption? The initial phase of the S-curve is relatively flat, representing the slow adoption by innovators and early adopters. Those groups are critical because they validate the innovation and demonstrate its benefits to others. When early adopters start using the innovation, they serve as opinion leaders or influencers. Their positive experiences and endorsements help to reduce uncertainty and build trust among the majority. This is important in convincing the more cautious segments of the population. As adoption reaches about 10% to 20%, a tipping point occurs. At this stage, the innovation gains enough traction and visibility, and it triggers social proof and conformity effect. Social proof is a psychological phenomenon where people assume the actions of others in an attempt to reflect correct behavior. As more people start using the innovation, it becomes increasingly visible and socially acceptable, encouraging others to follow suit. The conformity effect then kicks in, where people adopt the innovation to fit in with the larger group. At around 10% to 20% adoption, the innovation reaches a critical mass. This is the point at which the innovation rate accelerates significantly from the early adopters to the early majority. The early majority is more deliberate and cautious. However, seeing a growing number of peers adopting the innovation provides the confidence needed to make the switch. This creates a rapid acceleration in the adoption, forming the steep part of the S-curve. What makes an innovation ripple out successfully in a social system, such as an organization or society? There are 5 key factors, each playing a critical role in determining whether a new idea will take hold and spread. The first factor is relative advantage. This refers to whether the innovation is perceived as better than what came before. A new project management tool that significantly reduces time spent on administrative tasks will likely be adopted quickly if it offers clear advantages over the older system. Users must see tangible benefits such as increased efficiency, cost savings, or improved performance. The second factor is compatibility. This measures how well the innovation aligns with existing values, past experiences, and needs of potential adopters. For example, the new iPhone seamlessly integrates with a user's existing Apple devices such as MacBook, iPad, and Apple Watch. If the new iPhone enhances the overall user experience without disrupting their current habits, it's more likely to be adopted. The third factor is complexity. This addresses how easy the innovation is to understand and use. Consider the new iPhone, which features a user-friendly interface and clear, straightforward instructions. If the iPhone is easy to learn and use, potential adopters will feel more confident and willing to try it. But if the innovation is perceived as too complex, it may face resistance. The fourth factor is trialability. This refers to the ability to experiment with the innovation on a limited basis. Apple offers customers the opportunity to try out the new iPhone in store. This hands-on experience allows users to experiment with the iPhone's features without a full commitment, reducing perceived risk and increasing the likelihood of adoption. The fifth and final factor is observability. This is about how visible the benefits of the innovation are to others. If people see their friends and colleagues enjoy the new features of the latest iPhone, such as its impressive camera and innovative apps, the visible benefits will encourage others to adopt the iPhone as well. Observability creates a ripple effect as more people witness the positive outcomes. This is why Apple includes email signatures like "send from my iPhone" or "send from my iPad." Those signatures function as a subtle form of advertisement, making the use of their devices visible to others. When people see those signatures, they become aware of the widespread adoption and the benefits that users are experiencing, further driving interest and adoption. The path your innovation takes is also shaped by how you communicate it. Effective communication strategies can accelerate the diffusion process, turning a small splash into widespread ripples. Let's explore the different channels through which innovations spread. First, let's talk about interpersonal communication. Peer networks and opinion leaders play a key role in the diffusion of innovations. Consider a social setting where friends discuss the latest digital device. Personal endorsements from trusted peers can significantly impact our willingness to try a new device. This word-of-mouth communication is powerful because it comes from sources that we trust and value. The second channel is mass media. Newspaper, radio, television, and the internet are essential for spreading the word about new innovations. Mass media can reach a broad audience quickly. When a new technological breakthrough is covered by major news outlets, it gains widespread attention. Online articles, social media posts can create buzz and raise awareness about the innovation. Companies often use press conferences to announce new products, ensuring that influential journalists and social media influencers spread the news to their followers. This broad coverage helps to quickly build interest and credibility. Effective communication strategies are key to accelerating the diffusion process, which can transform a small splash into widespread ripples. While the diffusion of innovations theory has been widely influential, it is not without its criticisms. Let's look at some of the main critiques and understand the limitations of this theory. One main criticism is oversimplification. The theory tends to generalize the adoption process, assuming a uniform sequence of stages that may not apply to all contexts. For example, the theory suggests a linear path from awareness to adoption. But in reality, individuals and organizations may follow more complex, non-linear paths. Factors like cultural differences, economic conditions, and individual motivations can create diverse adoption patterns that the theory does not fully capture. In some communities, economic barriers may slow down the adoption processes, while in others, cultural values may accelerate it. Given those complexities, is it possible that the diffusion of innovations follows a power law distribution rather than a normal distribution? Unlike the normal distribution, which is bell-shaped and assumes most adopters fall near the average, a power law distribution suggests that a few key individuals or organizations play a disproportionate role in the adoption process. A very small number of highly influential individuals or hubs can drive the majority of the adoption, while many others have minimal influence. This pattern is often seen in social networks and the spread of information on platforms like Twitter, now known as X or Facebook. Consider how viral trends spread on social media. A very few key influencers with large followings can create a ripple effect, leading to widespread adoption much faster than through traditional means. When a popular influencer shares a new product or diet, their endorsement reaches millions, causing a rapid spike in adoption. This disproportionate influence aligns with the characteristics of a power law distribution we often see in social networks. Rogers' bell curve was developed based on the distribution of percentages among 5 groups of adopters. But if we shift our focus to the influence of adopters rather than their numbers or percentages, we may consider a power law distribution. In this model, a small number of highly influential individuals or hubs have a disproportionate impact on the diffusion process. In the power law distribution, a few key influencers or opinion leaders drive the majority of the adoption. If the diffusion of innovations indeed follows a power law distribution in many contexts, it has significant implications for how we understand and facilitate adoption. For leaders, administrators, and managers, this means focusing efforts on identifying and engaging those key influencers or hubs in their networks can be far more effective than trying to address the entire population uniformly. Tailored strategies that leverage the power of those influencers can accelerate the diffusion process and ensure a broader reach. Another critique is the pro-innovation bias. The theory of diffusion of innovations tends to assume that adoption of innovation is inherently positive and beneficial, overlooking potential downsides. In school systems, people are constantly bombarded by new practices and programs, but not all innovations are appropriate or beneficial for every context. For example, frequent change in teaching methods or curricula can lead to teacher burnout and student confusion, disrupting the learning process rather than enhancing it. The rush to adopt new educational practices without proper evaluation and training can result in significant waste of resources. The theory of diffusion of innovations has also been criticized for its lack of consideration for power dynamics in organizations. The impact of people with power and authority should not be treated equally with other adopters. People in positions of power, such as executives, presidents, board members, and senior managers, can significantly influence the adoption process due to their ability to allocate resources, shape organizational culture, and make strategic decisions. Those leaders often serve as gatekeepers whose support or resistance can make or break the diffusion of an innovation. Moreover, power dynamics can create an environment where lower-level employees may feel pressured to adopt innovations without adequate input or consideration of their practical implications. This top-down approach can lead to resistance, resentment, and even the failure of potentially beneficial innovations. While Everett Rogers did acknowledge 4 different types of innovation decisions: optional, collective, authority, and contingent innovation decisions. His theory of diffusion of innovations falls short of fully addressing the role of power and authority in the diffusion process. The use of authority can significantly influence the diffusion process by speeding up the initial adoption phase. When leaders mandate the adoption of an innovation, it can quickly push the innovation past the initial phase, leading to a sharp increase in early adoption. However, this top-down approach often runs into strong resistance later on. Employees may feel coerced, which leads to resentment and resistance. This resistance then slows down subsequent adoption phases and change the expected smooth progression of the bell curve. Instead of a gradual rise and fall, the curve might show a steep initial phase followed by a plateau or even a dip as resistance impacts further adoption. This is actually the implementation dip discussed by Michael Fullan in his book Leading in a Culture of Change, published in 2001. Here, the implementation dip refers to the temporary drop in performance and confidence when new changes or innovations are first introduced. During this phase, individuals and organizations may experience difficulties, frustrations, and setbacks as they adapt to new ways of doing things. Fullan considered the implementation dip as a natural part of the change process, but Rogers did not explicitly address it. Instead, Rogers discussed them as challenges, not necessarily a dip. The use of authority in mandating innovations may initially speed up adoption, but also can exacerbate the implementation dip. This reminds me of mask mandates and vaccine mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. During the early stages of the pandemic, authorities quickly implemented mask mandates and vaccine mandates. This top-down approach was intended to expedite the adoption of the health measures. However, this approach did not fully account for the diverse attitudes and motivations of the population. Despite the rapid initial adoption, the top-down mandates quickly ran into strong resistance and pushback against the mandates. Heavy-handed use of authority to push mandates is like running a sprint. It may get you off to a quick start, but it won't sustain you through the marathon. Now, let's bring this theory to life through practical applications. How can you, as leaders, apply the theory of diffusion of innovations to your work? Consider how you can leverage different phases and key factors in the theory of diffusion of innovations to successfully promote new ideas and technologies, and how you can address the criticisms of the theory, refine it, and even propose a new theory.